Welcome back, football friends. Dan and Tim here with another edition of the Banners Fly Forever football show. Tim, it's been a flurry of activity. It's the start of the new league year. I mean, technically, the league year starts on Wednesday, but
Yeah.
I mean, this is what the legal tampering period, and there's been plenty of tampering going on. I personally can't remember a free agency period this with this much flurry of activity in quite a number of years. What are your initial thoughts on the vibes and the feels around the league right now?
Yeah, I mean it's funny the legal tampering, which my own Chicago Bears had a deal pretty much done within 5 minutes. That's how you get that's efficiency in your working out your deals. We really have the illegal tampering period, the legal tampering period, and then the official start to the league year. But yeah, it has been wild. I mean, we've seen a record quarterback contract go off the board. We saw a series of running back signings that I don't think either of us, at least, saw happening in this free agent cycle, especially after everything that was going on last summer with, Zoom calls with every running back in the league trying to get better contracts and everything. And some big time defensive signings as well across the league. A lot of guys on the move. A lot of the guys that were near the top of lists of free agents available did not re-sign with their team. They're going elsewhere. So it's definitely changed the landscape of where we are from a couple days ago and where we're going to be leading to when we go to the draft.
Yeah, and I think we should just waste no time. We should just dive straight into it because
Absolutely.
there's a lot of deals to talk about in our limited time tonight. And I think we got to start with the big one, Kirk Cousins to the Atlanta
Sure.
Falcons. I mean, how long has it been that we've saying like, oh, if the Falcons just got a quarterback, just got
Mm-hmm.
it's probably been since Matt Ryan left a few
Yeah.
years ago to the Colts.
Yeah.
You
Gotta
know,
be.
you had the whole Lamar Jackson thing last year that didn't work out. You know, you had your Taylor Heineke's, your Desmond Ritters. You know, is Atlanta going to trade up? The Deshaun Watson saga, and it's kind of funny that the final solution just winds up being, Kirk Cousins, who throughout his career has kind of been, I want to say, like almost criticized for his mediocrity.
Yeah.
But when push comes to shove, like he is above baseline for a starting level quarterback in this league. And you could see that with the type of deal Atlanta gave to him, 4 years, $180 million. I believe 100 million of that is guaranteed. So, you know, I, I've been saying for a couple of years now, I think Atlanta is building something pretty nice as far as the roster goes. They just need to get that quarterback, the cherry on top. And
Yeah.
it seems like they finally got that in Kirk Cousins. And I'm very excited to see this team in 2024 and beyond.
I, I look at Kirk Cousins and his entire career, and I can't help but hanging with me here. All right, I can't help but think of the movie She's All That, and how Rachel Lee Cook plays this nerdy girl who no one could ever love, and then she becomes the prom queen and is the most attractive girl in the school. Kirk Cousins somehow has done that like 10 times in his career. Like he gets drafted behind RG3 and in Washington, so he's basically just drafted to be a backup quarterback, starts building his way up, becomes the starter. Then Washington's like, yeah, I don't know if we want to stick with him or not. We're not sure if he's good enough to win a championship. And he becomes the hottest name in free agency before he goes to Minnesota. And then there's a few years when he's in Minnesota where people are like, I don't know, it doesn't seem like he's a big game player. He can't win the big game. And now he's the hottest name once again in free agency. I mean, the guy has done really well for himself and got a lot of Coles cash on the way to get himself where he is. I mean, the biggest free agent signing. I think he's got two of the top five biggest quarterback free agent signings in NFL history are Kirk Cousins. So this one is the biggest one this year with the Falcons. He had previously had like the fourth highest when he signed with the Vikings. And it's crazy though, because you do look at Atlanta and it's like ever since that Super Bowl, the 28-3 Super Bowl, it has just been a rough time. They haven't been able to really put everything together. Kyle Shanahan leaves. And then they have no quarterback, but they have all of these weapons. They have Kyle Pitts. They have Calvin Ridley, who was there for a while. They have Drake London there now. And you're just like, when are they going to finally get that quarterback? They even got Bijan Robinson now. And somehow Kirk Cousins left Justin Jefferson behind. And it's almost like I feel more confident in the offense he's going to in Atlanta. I don't really know how that's working, but I think it's just such a well-rounded set of weapons and a division that's really not that good that I think Atlanta's kind of quietly become, well, maybe not that quiet, but become the favorites for the NFC South going into next year.
And, you mentioned so many great players on offense. Let's not forget that they've
Hmm.
been investing in the defense,
Right.
year after year. They signed safety Jesse Bates,
Yep.
off the Bengals last offseason. They have AJ Terrell, who is probably top 3 corner in the league right now. And you got the defensive line, you got nice players like, David Onyemata and, Arnold Ebiketie, I liked last year coming out of
Sure.
draft, and I think he can, improve as a player
Yeah.
in his second season. So everything about this roster is like, hey, we can win. And if you look at the division that they're playing in, the Panthers, we'll get into at some point. The Saints, I just don't know what they're doing down there.
Right.
And
Right.
Tampa Bay looked good this year, and we'll get into the Baker Mayfield signing in a little bit as well. But
Hmm.
I feel like it's going to be Atlanta and it's going to be Tampa at the end of the day. And the other thing I like to bring up is you look at the coaching staff that the Atlanta Falcons
Yeah.
brought in. Their offensive coordinator is Zach Robinson, who I
Right.
believe was passing game coordinator with the Los Angeles Rams
Right.
previously.
Where Kevin O'Connell
So,
was.
exactly, I was going to say, so you have Cousins going into another Sean McVay inspired offense like he
Right.
had in Minnesota. And I want to say he had some of his best performances under Kevin O'Connell in that
Right.
offense.
Right.
So it's, and then you throw in, they got the number 8 overall draft pick this year,
Exactly. Yep.
which,
They still have a top 10 pick.
yep, which we'll get into, our mock draft episodes. Trust us, they're in the pipeline. We can't wait to get them started. But at number 8, there's going to be a very, very good player there to select, whether it's
Right.
on the defensive side of the ball or the offensive side of the ball. The big thing is now it doesn't have to be a quarterback consideration,
Right.
like all the talk up until now is like, does Atlanta trade up? Do they, wait at 8 and take the 4th or 5th best quarterback? What do they do now?
Right.
I mean, I hate to say it, I wouldn't be surprised if they wound up trading back, and
They
adding
might. They very
a
well
couple
could.
pieces. Yeah, adding a couple
Absolutely.
pieces. So,
And it was a
Atlanta,
minor deal, but they also signed Darnell Mooney earlier today, which I know
yeah,
we'll get into with all the different wide receivers. But I mean, they've kind of now fixed a lot of the different holes all around, so you can do anything with that pick.
and they got rid of Arthur Smith. So,
Yeah,
now
that's
all these top 10
addition by
selections.
subtraction.
Yes. So your Kyle Pitts, your Drake London, your Bijan Robinson, all these top 10 drafted offensive players can finally be, utilized the way they're supposed to.
Mhm.
Bijan looked so good in his limited skill set, but the whole problem was Arthur Smith was, taking him off the field to give touches to Tyler Algier, which I
What?
like Tyler Algier as a death piece, but when you have Bijan Robinson, take the Ferrari out for a drive, put the Ford
Exactly.
truck away on the weekends. So
Yeah, you don't
I'm
draft a
very
running back top 10 just to let it sit in the garage. Like
yeah.
it's crazy.
So I'm very excited to see what Atlanta can do this year with this team.
Yep.
Uh, Conversely, I'm also very interested to see what Minnesota does.
Hmm.
We kind of had a quick discussion on air before we started hitting the record button, but Minnesota, we'll just slide into right now. They bring in Sam Darnold.
Yep.
1 year is $10 million. So on the roster, they actually have Sam Darnold, Nick Mullins, and Jaron Hall all under contract. That's
Right.
3 quarterbacks.
Right.
Teams don't carry 4 quarterbacks. So we're looking at a situation where Minnesota's accepting defeat. They're not going to get a rookie this year, or you're going to have somebody like Nick Mullins being a cut over the summer. So
Right. Right.
uh, obviously that's a lot more draft talk centric, but it's interesting to see how Minnesota is going to approach losing out on the Kirk Cousins sweepstakes.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Minnesota's free agency, they've gone for a lot of defensive players, so it's almost like they're going to try to build up their defense, keep Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison and TJ Hawkinson around, and then just try to get lucky somewhere at quarterback. I don't know if the move is going to be, and obviously, like you said, we'll get into this more when we get in our draft coverage. I don't know if the move is going to be to move up from their pick, which I think is 12, to get in that top 10 to get a quarterback. But Sam Darnold's an interesting choice to be like, that's going to be our starter next year if that is the decision. I mean, it's a guy who hasn't really consistently started games in years. He had some starts in Carolina a couple of years ago, obviously with the Jets, but a guy that's seeing ghosts and was a backup quarterback last year isn't quite the guy that you think is like, all right, that's the guy that's going to lead the way. especially in a division that's got a really good Lions team and a pretty good Packers team that we just saw in the playoffs last year. So I'm not really sure what this direction is right now at all.
But so let's slide into the next one of the next bigger deals. And I come from the New York metro area, the tri-state. So this was the talk of the town the last 2 days. But Saquon Barkley signs with the Philadelphia Eagles a 3-year, $37.75 million contract. Benedict Arnold, Trader, Tiki 2.0,
Tiki.
been hearing all these things from all my friends who are Giants fans, and I said this to a couple people, including my brother. I was like, you're also mad at Saquon, but I believe you should be mad at the franchise.
Mhm.
You can't
Yeah.
blame this kid who was drafted number 2 overall as kind of like a last ditch effort to get another playoff run out of a aging, decaying Eli Manning, and then that doesn't work out. So you want to overdrafting a Daniel Jones
Yeah.
in the 2019 draft, a top 10 selection.
Yep.
Um, you've invested what 3 first round draft picks now in the offensive line, and you still have a bottom 10 unit
Yep.
in the league.
Yep.
So it's not his fault that nothing has gone right around him.
Right.
And he's 27 years old. He's coming off of his second knee injury. Like he wants he's realizing, he's a very smart kid. He's realizing this is might be his last contract.
Absolutely.
This might be his last chance to go out there to win a Super Bowl and to make a little bit of money at the same time. There is no good way you can criticize this player for switching, from the Giants to the Eagles. He's at some point he's got to do what's good for him.
Right. And I mean, I think you can be understandably upset that you're going to have to watch him play on a rival's team. But the fact is, the rival wanted to pay him. I mean, that's it. Like, if you're getting offered that kind of money as a running back in this day and age, a 27-year-old running back with multiple knee injuries in this day and age, of course you're going to take that deal. This was a no doubt signing by Saquon Barkley. Like, when I saw the numbers come in, it was like, holy cow, running backs are starting to get paid again, maybe. And it's been kind of that story throughout free agency thus far. But Barkley in particular, of course, he's going to be the headlining name on this list. But like you said, there hasn't been enough done in New York to make him successful. And his career is starting to, maybe turn into the golden years here, because it doesn't feel like that long ago that he came into the league. It feels like, oh, he's still young. He's still starting up. He's going to be 27. This legitimately could be his last decent contract. And like you said, I just think if you're going to move away from New York, it's a bummer that Giants fans got to watch him play in an Eagles uniform, but I don't think it's anything that you could be booing at him or anything, because your team didn't pay him and your rival did. Like that's it. And your rival also built up a team in a manner that allowed for this signing to happen. Like, the Giants paying this exact same money to Barkley would have made 0 sense at all, but they've made all the other mistakes that led to Barkley not being the finishing touch on top of a team that is already competitive. The Eagles are in a zone where they can actually make a signing like this because they have a good team around him. It's as simple as that.
Yeah. And uh a lot of my friends were saying, like, oh, the Giants, like, they don't have the money to sign Saquon. Like, why don't they have the money to sign Saquon?
Right.
And it's because you keep on missing on these first round draft picks, and
Yep.
you have to invest over and over and over again into the exact same
Exactly.
position. And by that I mean the offensive line group.
Mm-hmm.
Now hopefully they fire the offensive line coach and things start to turn it around. But from Saquon's point of view, it's a little bit too little, too late. And I know another thing I mentioned to you in one of our chats is MetLife and the turf there, and
Yeah.
it is just a killer for knees and injuries.
Yeah.
So, do you think that maybe Saquon getting off of that turf for 8, 9 games out of the year, he'll still be there for 1 game a year,
One game. Yeah.
1 game, possibly 2 if they play the Jets from time to
Sure.
time.
Sure.
But does that switch to a better playing surface, one, help him go back to that form, that explosiveness that we saw
Right.
when he was
Right.
coming out of Penn State? Does it also add a little bit of longevity to his career now that he's entering his 30s? And are these two things that maybe weighed in on the decision for him to leave New York? Maybe talking to his personal trainer, to doctors, saying like, "Hey, if you can get away from this playing surface, God bless, it's even better for you.
Right. I mean, I don't think it was the top factor, but it wasn't a bad perk at all. I mean, like it's something that has probably played in his head is that he's going to get some sort of deal and he wants to be able to play out that deal. Like not all 3 years are going to be guaranteed, so you want to be healthy enough to play out that deal and get all the money that's on it. So it definitely probably is a factor on it. But good for Saquon. Good to see him. I hate to say it like to Giants fans that are watching, but it's like I'm excited to see what Saquon Barkley can do now that he's behind a real offensive line. Like I'm excited to see what he looks like in a real offense with a quarterback and set of receivers that are a threat enough that the opposing defense can't just zero in on the running back. So it'll be really, really exciting to see what happens in Philly next year with him, I think.
Yeah, and we both have a fantasy football background, and fantasy football is always the talk of the town when it comes to football fans. And
Right.
is Saquon Barkley like a top 3 draft pick next year in
And
redraft leagues?
in
Like,
redraft, you'd have to consider it, I think,
yeah,
right? I mean,
yes,
when you look at the efficiency numbers that DeAndre Swift had with the Eagles last year, they weren't even all that great. And he still finished with over 1,000 yards and was, a top 5 rushing running back last year. So what is a superior talent like Barkley going to be able to do? It's really exciting to think about what that could be.
I'm very, very excited to see it. And it's funny because all my Giants fans friends are like, "Oh, now it's guaranteed Eagles Giants, week 1,"
Sure.
just for the storyline narrative of it.
Absolutely. Well, hopefully, if it's at MetLife, Saquon can survive the first week and get a full year out.
But speaking of the other storylines and narratives, I think a emerging storyline and narrative across the league is the investment on the interior of the defensive line position. This
Yes.
is this is something new. We've seen corners, we've seen edge defenders like kind of lead the way as
Right.
far as defensive spending, but just the past couple of days, we've seen 2 of the bigger defensive contracts go to interior defensive linemen.
Absolutely.
That's referring to Chris Jones, who stays in Kansas City, signing a 5-year, almost $160 million
Yep.
contract. Crazy big number,
Yep.
which the Patrick Mahomes contract is just the gift that keeps on giving. Like, my
Absolutely.
God, like, 10 years and we'll just redo it every once in a while.
Yeah,
I
they
saw
just redid it today.
I was gonna say I saw a report before we went live that they created another 22 million out of thin air for
Yep.
T Higgins or something, maybe, who knows, we'll see.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
But the deal I did want to circle in on is Christian Wilkins. He
Yeah,
signs with the Las Vegas Raiders. That's 4 years, $110 million.
yeah, and a lot
um,
of guaranteed money in there
a
too.
lot of guaranteed money, and now you put him on a defensive line next to a Max Crosby, who's one of
Mhm.
the top 3, top 4 edge defenders across the league. Like, that Raiders defense is looking a lot better, than it was a
Absolutely.
couple days ago.
Well, and they have a new head coach who was an interim head coach, but is now full-time head coach, Antonio Pierce, who is a defensive player who, is looking to probably put a little bit more focus in on stopping Patrick Mahomes than outgunning him, which isn't a terrible idea. They beat the Mahomes Chiefs last year on Christmas Day, I believe. So it's not an impossibility for that to happen. But I mean, if you're gonna be competing in that division, you got to be able to stop the other offenses in there. I mean, you have Patrick Mahomes in the Chiefs, you have Justin Herbert in the Chargers, and you have whatever Sean Payton's creating in Denver 6 games out of the year. So yeah, you got to be able to stop the opposing team. But it is interesting because I'm not exactly sure what's going on offensively in Las Vegas. While you see all the defense building up here, it's going to be interesting to see what they're able to produce. I mean, obviously, you still have Devontae Adams as a weapon, as a wide receiver, but after that, there's not a lot that you're going, man. Can't wait to see what Gardner Minshew is going to do for the Raiders this year, handing it off to Zamir White, I guess. It's a weird two-sided thing here where a lot of money is on the defensive side of the ball and there's not a lot going on the offensive side. So it's an interesting signing. It wasn't the place I thought Wilkins was going to go. I wasn't zeroing in on any in particular, but I was surprised when I saw it was the Raiders. Because like you said, it's a lot of money for an interior defensive lineman when you already have a really, Pro Bowl awesome defensive end in Max Crosby there. But they are going to be something to have to deal with when you're game planning to play the Raiders for sure.
Yeah, and you look at the defense, and it's a nice signing, and you got Max Crosby, but the secondary still leaves a lot to be desired.
Absolutely. Yep.
So the Raiders, they're sitting there with a top 15 draft pick. Quarterback is obviously of some importance. I don't think Gardner Minshew is really moving the needle off of a rookie quarterback if one falls to you, but they have enough holes on the other positions of the field in the defensive secondary that maybe they sit there and they take a Terrion Arnold or a
Mhm.
Quinyon Mitchell, and
Sure.
it's just some weird amalgamation of Aiden O'Connell playing half the games, Gardner Minshew playing half the games. Like I don't know what to expect out of this Raiders offense, and we're kind of running out of spots in the musical chair circus of
Yeah.
quarterbacks that I don't really see anybody else landing there. Especially considering when they gave Gardner 2 years, $25 million. That's not nothing.
Yeah.
You
That's
know,
not usually backup money, but I mean, I suppose if the right deal came along and they could move up into the top 10 to draft JJ McCarthy, maybe that's something they're considering, but I don't think it's something they're forcing. And I think they are actually content with just saying we're going to go with Gardner Minshew. Like you said, I mean, 2 years, 25 million is nothing to scoff at. And that's starter money. It's not like teams haven't, signed a guy to that and then drafted a rookie and played him before, but um, I don't know. Right now, it looks like Gardner Minshew is going to be a starting quarterback next year,
oh man,
like
I
going into the year.
yeah, yeah, it's very interesting, and how far into the year do we get Devontae Adams like
Get me
Antonio
out of
Brown
here.
moments, like,
Yeah,
get me out of here, trade him to the Jets, like, no matter what.
yeah,
So it'll be interesting to see how things go in Las Vegas. But sticking to the defensive line with our next move, this one
yeah.
actually is probably the most recent move we'll talk about. Daniil Hunter,
Yep.
he signs with the Houston Texans, 2 years, $49 million.
And like
Another minute,
48 million's guaranteed. It's
yeah,
like
lots
almost a completely
guaranteed,
guaranteed contract.
lots guaranteed. This is another Minnesota departure. So I guess he learned the art of negotiating from Kirk Cousins there.
Yeah,
But so
absolutely.
you have Daniel Hunter, joining Will Anderson on this Texans defensive line, and you gotta like what's going on in Houston.
Yeah,
They hit on CJ Stroud, obviously. Like, is that because they thought CJ was the guy, or is that just because he was the consolation prize for not having the first overall pick?
right.
We might never know, because if I had to guess, the Houston front office is never going to admit
They're going to their
that
grave
it
with whatever that
yeah,
was.
yeah, exactly. They will never admit that Bryce was number 1 on their board. So, um, but yeah, so you're putting this defense together. You got Will Anderson, you got now Daniel Hunter, and Derek Stingley looks great. Even they took a flyer on Jeff Okuda,
Yep.
another former first round corner, out of Detroit. So
Right.
things are looking really, really good in Houston, and kind of at the same token, the rest of the division is not looking so great.
Yeah.
Tennessee's kind of in this weird Las Vegas Raiders type of
Yeah.
territory.
Yeah. That's a good description.
uh, Jacksonville, it was like, anointed as the next thing, perhaps a little bit too early. They
Hmm.
can't seem to stop, tripping over their own shoes. So, is this Houston's division to take for a couple of years?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was a lot closer of a division than people are probably remembering, with Houston going into the playoffs and actually getting to, the second round. But it is going to be hard, I think, to beat out the Texans over the next couple of years. I think we haven't fully seen what Anthony Richardson is with the Colts yet. We know that Jacksonville was able to put a really good year together 2 years ago. But I just look at this team and I'm like, man, this is, and we'll dig into this a lot when we start getting into our draft coverage. But I mean, this is why you swing at the quarterback at the top of the draft. I mean, this is why you do it, because when you hit, if it hits like CJ Stroud does, then you can make signings like Daniil Hunter at 48 million guaranteed to pair with your going into a second year edge rusher and go, we're going to have a stud defensive line. And we're not going to have to invest a ton into the offensive side of the ball because we have a guy that uplifts all of the other talent that's there. We got a couple of late wide receivers, not late, mid-round wide receivers. We're going to trade for a back who was still one of the top backs in the league last year, and is a pass catcher as well. And we're going to take off from there. A couple of years ago, we were coming in going like, yeah, we got Davis Mills and Damian Pierce. Like that was like 2 years ago, man. That like that was the offensive side of the ball, and now it's like, look at this. This is one of the scarier kind of dark horse teams in the AFC, and that's why you can make moves like this, because you made that quarterback selection correctly.
Yeah, and like you said, that's a conversation we're gonna have all spring long. You know, whether it's the Patriots, the Giants, the Commanders, the Bears, you have to keep swinging, because
Yep.
if you don't, you wind up stuck in this purgatory. Where the Raiders find themselves right now, where the Broncos find themselves potentially right now with the whole Russell Wilson thing not working
Right.
out. So Houston is a team that I'm personally am scared of. My Browns, we took a beating in the
Sure.
playoffs, but I can't say I was surprised by that outcome, because CJ, he's kind of the new bad man. He's kind of the new mini Mahomes. But
Absolutely.
so Danielle Hunter is out, and
Hmm.
funnily enough, Jonathan Grenard, former Texan, is in for the
Switching
Vikings.
places,
So
trading wives, or whatever that show was.
yeah, exactly. So Grenard's deal is actually 4 years, $76 million. So
Hmm.
it was very interesting how the contracts were so different
Yeah,
between
absolutely.
the two players, and it's kind of like, what does Minnesota want versus what does Houston want? The one thing I will say with Houston is that Hunter contract kind of lines up nicely for when Will Anderson will be ready for
Right.
his post rookie extension.
Exactly.
I'm sure Nick Casario timed that perfectly.
Yeah.
So that's some smart thinking. Grenard, 4-year deal. I don't really see him like paired in Minnesota with anybody, in
Right.
particular right now.
Right.
Um, Van Ginkel, I'm not even
Yeah,
sure what his contract is right now.
they brought in Van Ginkel at 2 years, 20 million. So they signed both Van Ginkel and Grenard. So getting both of them, and then they also brought in Blake Cashman, which was 3 years, 22.5 million for the linebackers. So again, a lot of the Minnesota moves were on the defensive side of the ball. I think Grenard is a really solid pickup. I mean, he was a really good edge rusher last year, and I think it's kind of like where these two franchises are going, right? Like Grenard's taking a 4-year deal because he's a little younger. He wants more insurance of long term on the deal. And he's a very good player, but he's not at the top level where Danielle Hunter is. But Hunter is also a lot older. So that's where you're getting the 2-year, almost fully guaranteed deal. So it would make sense a team like Houston that looks like it's ready to start competing like right now would be grabbing Hunter, where Grenard is part of kind of a multi-year plan in Minnesota. So it definitely is a nice little signing for the Vikings. The Vikings have made some interesting moves as far as who they let go and who they're bringing in, but Grenard is one that I like. I'm not so sure signing a 29-year-old running back is like the move I would have gone to. But Aaron Jones, I like a lot too. But I mean, at 29 years old and with Sam Darnold as your starting quarterback, I'm not really sure that money needed to be spent there. But Grenard, I think, is a really solid signing, and somebody as a Bears fan, I don't really want to have to play twice a year, but we will have to deal with that, I guess.
But it's so funny because it's so similar to the Raiders in the fact that you put together this very good defensive line, but then you look at the secondary behind it, and it's
Yeah,
kind of Swiss cheese.
exactly.
So it's like God, they draft back to back also, which is like the other funny thing.
Yeah,
Could we see corner one and corner two go off the board
potentially. Yeah,
to Minnesota and Las Vegas? Inversely, like, I wouldn't be surprised if we see a back to back, Bo Nix, Michael Penix.
sure.
Like that's just so it's so weird to say, because like you go into a lot of drafts and teams that looking for quarterbacks, you just like boom, you lock in a quarterback there. And like, I don't know if it's the best spot for a rookie quarterback, because one, I don't know if those rookies should be taken so high. And then
Hmm.
also, like, there's so many other holes on the roster. And there's like such good players at certain positions.
Absolutely. And I mean, the crazy thing is like I know we're in a free agency period where we saw Kirk Cousins sign somewhere, but like guys like that don't typically reach free agency. Like when you're going to find a quarterback, you have to find it through the draft more often than not. You're not finding it through free agency. So they're going to have to take a swing somewhere in this draft. You would think it's probably not going to be their first round pick unless they can get up in the top 10, because I don't think you're going to take Knicks or Penix all that early. But it just feels like both these teams are kind of building up the defense and expecting that something's going to happen at quarterback. And I'm just not sure that that's the right tactic to go about. We've seen that happen time and time again for teams that finish in the worst spot you can, right in the teens where you're drafting, where you're not bad enough to get one of the top quarterbacks in the draft, but not good enough to make the playoffs or actually be a contender. So that's kind of where both of them are sitting right now in this purgatory.
I think they're both waiting for Joe Flacco to make his decision about where
Right.
he's playing next year, because
Absolutely.
the Browns unfortunately brought in Jameis, so the Joe Flacco era is over in Cleveland.
Where will he be next to lead a team to the playoffs is the question. But I was
I have
hinting
to,
at Aaron Jones signing with Minnesota. The reasoning that it was even a possibility was he was cut on Monday because the Packers signed Josh Jacobs, former Raider, to a 4-year, $48 million deal. But we should probably immediately put the caveat that there's no guaranteed money after the first year. So this could just be a 1-year deal. Jacobs is an interesting signing. He's still younger. He's 26, I think, still. So he's not really all that old. But he had a rough year last year after a really, really productive 2022. So I don't know, like maybe this is coming from a Bears side because Aaron Jones was like a notorious Bears killer. But I'm like excited that they moved on from Jones and went to Josh Jacobs. Like this is a team that's the youngest team in the league last year, and they're like, Aaron Jones is too old. Like we're too old of a team. we got to get younger. It was like, well, no, you don't. You're fine. Like everybody else on the team is young. But yeah, they moved on from a 29-year-old back to a 26-year-old back, and they also signed a 24-year-old safety from the Giants. So an interesting couple moves here by the Packers in Josh Jacobs and Xavier McKinney, who is the 24-year-old safety. Interesting too, from the history of the Packers don't usually spend in free agency like ever. So seeing them actually be a name on here is very surprising and something I wasn't expecting. Is that just NFC North fandom that I noticed that, or is that something you saw too?
No, I agree. And the other thing is they released David Backyardi.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right
Future
before,
Jet.
yeah, right, exactly. Pencil that in. Um, Yeah, Green Bay is very interesting because the Jordan Love contract last year, where uh, the 5th-year option was declined, but then they have this like weird amalgam of like a not a franchise tag, but kind of a franchise tag
Right.
type of contract. And as we saw, these young pieces, they did a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Last year, going to the playoffs, going in and beating Dallas, although that was the upset that everybody called from 1,000 miles away. Um,
Went
so
toe
now
to
the
toe with the
question
Niners, though.
So now the question is, how do you build around this young quarterback,
Yeah,
Jordan Love? Um, and is it like kind of just getting your whole roster's like age in alignment, by getting rid of some of
sure.
the older veterans? Um, from what I've read, the Aaron Jones thing was, couldn't reach a number, so they said, out of here, see you type of thing.
Right.
Which, I mean, Jones was there for a while. He was a fan favorite,
Mm-hmm.
so is there more than just the contract stuff that went on? I don't know.
Maybe.
And it
Well,
seems,
it's the whole running back room too, because they let AJ Dillon walk as well. So this
yeah,
is a completely different room coming into next year.
yeah. So it's very interesting. It almost signals like they want to do stuff slightly differently
Yeah.
on offense next year. Which, um, I mean, it worked last year what they did
Yeah.
do. So I don't know why they're trying to change it, but I think Josh Jacobs is still a very capable running back
Mhm.
in this league. And like you said, a lot of the money is Fugazi money.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
there, but it's not. So you know, Josh's agent gets to put the post out like, oh, I just signed a nearly $50 million contract for my client, and the Packers, they get to maybe walk away after 1 year. So
Right.
it's kind of a win-win for everybody in that
Absolutely.
standpoint. But um, Green Bay is another team that I'll be very interested to see what they do when it comes to the draft,
Yeah.
because um, it's like a solid foundation of a roster. I feel like it's just missing superstars. at certain positions.
Absolutely. I think when you see them go as far as they did in the playoffs and almost beat the Niners to go to the NFC Championship game last year when no one was expecting anything out of this team at all. It's going to be interesting going into this year with expectations. Like this team is now like it's going to be on people's radar. It's going to be a team that you're going into the game, you're going, we have to have a good game plan. We got to be ready to go. Packers are a good team. But I think the Xavier McKinney signing is a real sneaky one in this free agency period that maybe not as many people are crediting the Packers for this move. He's 24 years old. He was a great safety for the Giants. I mean, when we did our fix your franchise with the Giants, like that was the one name we said, like, you got to bring McKinney back. Like
Have to keep. Yeah.
you got to. That's how you're going to build around your defense and keep it young and talented. And they didn't. And the Packers are beneficiaries of that. And the Packers had some periods last year where their secondary was real rough, really rough. When Tommy DeVito's beating you on Monday Night Football, it's not the most exciting secondary. So it's a big signing for them and helping round out that team. So I like what they've done in free agency, but it's kind of weird because I'm not used to seeing the Packers do literally anything in free agency. So two big signings on the first day for Green Bay.
Yeah, the McKinney signing was, like you said, under the radar, but I think amazing on the Packers side. And for the Giants, that was the one player that you know we said they should have keep. But it's just not to talk about the Giants again so much, but it's just another side effect of the Daniel Jones contract.
Exactly.
All that money has been spent, and you go back and you say, what if the Giants just switched their decision? What if they franchise tagged Daniel Jones, signed Saquon to an extension?
Right.
Daniel Jones would be very easy to walk away from right now. You still have Saquon, the fan favorite. You'd have the money to sign Xavier McKinney, and you're picking number 6, which is outside of maybe the quarterback you want, but maybe the Giants like 4 quarterbacks in this draft.
Yeah.
Who
Yeah.
knows? So, McKinney, like you said, he's 24 years old. He's young. He's one of the top in his position.
Yep.
You shouldn't let a player like that walk away. And Green Bay just stole one basically.
Mm-hmm. And you can tell where Green Bay valued him, considering how many safeties were cut leading up to free agency, and that they zeroed in and said, like, this is the guy, we're going to get him and we're going to pay him. I mean, going out and giving him 4 years and $68 million, that's huge considering everything else that's going on in the safety world right now. So what they feel about him, and they got themselves a young, really good player. So not happy as a Bear fan. Moving on. One of the kind of, I guess maybe another under the radar deal, but a big deal. The Tennessee Titans signed Lloyd Cushenberry to a 4-year, $50 million deal. So they have a new center in Tennessee. This coming off right after drafting Peter Skoronski a year ago. They're trying to build that line back up, which is interesting in Tennessee. It would be a Mike Vrabel move, and with Mike Vrabel not there, and but they are moving on from Derrick Henry, and they're going to have Tony Pollard in the backfield. And I mean, Dan, do you have anything to say about Tony Pollard and this backfield at all in Tennessee?
Is it backup?
He's a backup.
Very,
Oh, okay.
very, very highly paid backup.
Yeah,
Because
it's an expensive backup.
my boy Tajay is still RB1 down in both in my heart and down in Tennessee.
Absolutely.
I mean, that was just a weird signing, just
Yep.
because Pollard and Tajay have such similar skill sets.
Yep.
So, I mean, last year was nice because they had Derrick Henry and Tajay together. It's like a yin and yang, a thunder and lightning type of approach. But now you bring in Tony Pollard, which is very similar to Spears, and I don't see how like the offensive dynamic is changing when one of them walks up the field. It's 3 years, 24 million. I don't have the guaranteed money in front of me offhand, but it's not.
I think it's built sort of like the DeAndre Swift one, where it's really only like the first 2 years.
Yeah.
Like 14 or 15 guaranteed.
So it's not no money.
Yep.
That's for sure. So
Yep.
I mean, I don't know. Pollard, he looked great when Zeke carried most of the workload. He became the guy. Was it his stamina? Is he just
Right.
not that type of running back? Is it, the more his volume goes up, his efficiency just tanks? Maybe, maybe he has to run behind Tajay this year also in order
Yeah, I
to
mean
get that.
Tajay in the Zeke role isn't a bad thing. If
No.
that's how you get the most out of Pollard, I guess Tajay just got to be Zeke this year.
Yeah, but more importantly, I did want to talk about the Tennessee offensive line because,
Mhm.
they have my boy down there, uh, Bill Callahan,
Yep.
and as the off brought in as the offensive line coach to work with his son, and I'm excited to see what he's going to do.
Sure.
Peter Skoronsky last year, first round draft pick, left guard. There's talks about maybe moving him to left tackle,
Mhm.
but you bring in Lloyd Cushenberry to solidify that center position. And let's not forget, at left tackle, they have Andre Dillard, who's a former first round draft pick,
Yep.
has produced nothing in his career, but now you're getting him with the best offensive line coach in football.
Yep.
Is he going to get the potential out of him? And then right tackle's a disaster. Yeah, Petit Frere at Ohio State's just, it's playing terribly. But the good news is the Tennessee Titans, they're picking at what, 7?
7th. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
And there's plenty of good offensive tackles in this draft.
exactly. There's a ton of tackles.
They could be a team that trades back,
I
honestly,
was
from
just about to say
7.
that, if they're sitting there and there's a quarterback that somebody likes, like Minnesota or like a
Exactly.
Las Vegas or Denver,
Yep.
they can trade back and they can still get, a tackle because you got Fashanu, Joe Alt, Talise Fawaga,
Mhm.
and then even towards the back of the first round, players like Tyler Guyton.
Yep.
There's plenty of good tackles in this draft class. So the Tennessee Titans are poised to, I want to say, go from worst to first. Probably not that extreme, but I
We were
feel like
just talking up the Texans, man. We can't do
we're.
that.
No, I meant with their offensive line
Sure,
rankings.
sure.
Just no, not the whole team, just the offensive line, because you go look at that defense and it
Yeah.
leaves a lot to be
It's like
desired.
you believe in Will Levis a lot more than I knew, Dan. That's
Hey,
yeah, but
four touchdown debut. He's just gotta you
absolutely.
just gotta
But
repeat that performance again.
it's a nice deal for Cushenberry. I mean, congrats to him. Connor Williams is the other center that's kind of in this class that could get decent money, but he has the torn ACL, and so I think Cushenberry was seen as the best available for the Titans to make this move. And hey, if you're going to be rebuilding your team or building it back up, it's not bad to start in the trenches. Like if you can win in the trenches, you're going to win a lot of football games. So it's a nice little move by them for sure. A couple other signings one more signing we should probably talk about. The Eagles had a lot of different guys that they're maybe moving on from, that they have moved on from on the defensive side of the ball. But bringing in Bryce Huff on a 3-year, $51.1 million deal is a nice little deal, I think, as well. I think it's again a lot of money, but that's what's going to be in any free agent, at least first day free agent deal. But Bryce Huff feels like a Howie Roseman kind of player and fits this mold really well. And I think Philly's going into this offseason thinking we need to kind of reshape. We're not tearing anything down, but we need to reshape what worked out for us a couple of years ago and get back to that top performance football. What are your feelings on the Huff deal?
Yeah, I was actually talking to a coworker today who is an Eagles fan, and I'm sure you remember before free agency started, there was rumors that both Josh Sweat and Hassan Reddick were available for trade.
Correct.
And when I saw that, my first thought was like, oh, I guess Nolan Smith is looking a lot better
Yeah,
than he
exactly.
has in the past in order
Right.
for them to feel confident that they can put those two guys out there. Obviously, no trade has happened up to this
Right.
point, but so you bring in somebody like Huff. Does that signal that maybe only one of Sweat or Reddick are on the move?
Right. Right.
I mean, Philadelphia and building through the trenches, name a more iconic duo.
Exactly.
They can't be beat. So the defensive line depth just continues to mount and mount and mount, and it helps because you got players like a Jalen Carter and a
Right.
Jordan Davis who are best used in a limited snap
Exactly.
roles.
Yep.
If you can get those guys out there under 35 or 40 snaps a game, you're going to get the best out of them. But once you
Exactly.
start asking them to play 55, 60, 65 snaps, that's when you're not getting, that prime, prime defensive player.
Absolutely.
So having more bodies is kind of the key to Philadelphia's success along the defensive line. And so honestly, anybody they could bring in that can contribute is going to be great.
Yeah, absolutely. I like the signing. I think it kind of is a call to they wanted to maybe get a little younger as well on the defensive side of them. I mean, it's not that they were super old or anything, but if you're talking about moving on from like Reddick and having a Nolan Smith or a Bryce Huff being in there, I mean, it is a move to saying like we're going to continue to have sustained success, and we're not going all in as if this is our window right now and it's open this much. We're going to keep that window open and keep pushing to be the top of the NFC East. I really do like the deal. It's not that super long of a deal at 3 years, but you know, the NFL 3 years is a lifetime. So it's a good little deal for sure. Outside of those deals, we did touch on the Joe Mixon trade briefly, but there was a trade that just happened only a couple hours ago here, with Deontay Johnson getting traded to the Carolina Panthers. The Panthers, who have been, you know, kind of sneaky, making some interesting signings in the trenches as well in this free agency period. But Deontay Johnson gives Bryce Young a really solid route runner, pass catcher that is kind of one of the better possession receivers in the league. So it's an interesting little move. What did you think about the Panthers and Deontay Johnson? Seems like maybe they're going to want to try to get Bryce Young some help quick so they can actually start developing him.
So the main reason I like this move, and I hate to say it, but we're going back to the draft talk with almost every topic, but
Sure.
we're primarily a draft show, so that's what you're gonna
Well,
get
and
here.
these go together so
Yeah,
much.
exactly. So up until now, pick 33, because the Panthers don't have the first overall pick. Your Bears have that pick.
Yeah,
Uh,
baby.
pick 33. Have you seen anybody besides Lad McConkey mocked to the Panthers?
At one point, I saw Xavier Legette because I think somebody was just like, you know, it'd be funny. It was just we're going to put all of those South Carolina receivers on the Panthers. No, it's like Lad McConkey or I saw somebody say,
Xavier Worthy
yeah,
or
exactly, Xavier Worthy, just a speedy, small, you know, possession receiver.
yeah. So now listen, the Brian Burns move,
Yep.
uh, just terrible, terrible. But we can't ignore the fact that it also got Carolina pick 39.
Right.
So you go into the draft, you got pick 33, you got pick 39, and up until now, pick 33 was just written in Sharpie. It's got to
Hmm.
be a wide receiver.
Right.
Not saying that their receiver group is like fixed and like complete and
Sure.
and fully good to go, but it's not as dire
Yeah.
of a need as it was before. So now you're picking at 33. So now, if one of these corners falls to you, or
Right.
or one of these tackles that we talk about, there's so many tackles, falls to you, you have a little bit of flexibility with picks 33 and 39.
And
The
you might even be able to recoup some draft capital because 33 is historically a much traded pick because it's the first pick of the second round. There's a day off of everybody kind of figuring, oh, this is still left on the board. I want to go up and get him. And so they could still turn 33 into multiple picks as well.
Yeah, exactly. Um, so Deontay Johnson, one big knock on the Panthers receiver group last year was they didn't separate, and
Right.
Deontay Johnson is one of the better separators in the league. We've seen him have super special seasons with Ben Roethlisberger on the tail end of his career,
Right.
and let's be honest, in Pittsburgh there was kind of a choke point in that wide receiver room because
Yeah.
embarrassment of riches, you could say they just happen to draft good wide receivers
Every
one
time.
after the other. Yeah, exactly. So, that's a great pipeline for them, just acquiring more talent by using that skill of drafting wide receivers. So for Carolina, I think it's an amazing move because it gives you positional flexibility when you get to the
Hmm.
draft, which is so important when you're building around a young corner. I mean,
Right.
a young quarterback, because you need to I always say this: when you draft a quarterback, a rookie quarterback in the NFL, you start a timer.
Right.
And from that point until you hit year 3,
Yep.
the only thing you want to do, you don't care about winning. You want to determine, is this quarterback worth paying?
Exactly.
And you have to do everything in your power to make yourself eliminate all the controls, all the
Hmm.
variables. You want to make sure that this evaluation is so pure, and the only thing that is being analyzed is whether this quarterback is good or not.
Yep.
Now, the Panthers are already 1 year behind because the offensive line was a mess, the receiver
Yep.
room was a mess,
Yep.
and the coaching was probably also a little bit of a mess because they're not there.
Yep.
So now they're playing catch up. Now they have to put things around Bryce and figure out, like, hey, was year one Bryce, or was
Hmm.
1 year just the disaster, that
Hmm.
was surrounding Bryce? So now you got Deontay Johnson down there. It kind of fixes the wide receiver room a little bit, or at least gives you a little bit more insight into, was that the issue?
Right.
Um, like I said, 33, 39, you can go, tackle or guard or something at that position. Like, there's options now in Carolina.
Yeah.
It's not doom and gloom. It's just doom.
Right. And you can't change the sins of the past, right? You can't change the fact that you traded everything you did to get the top pick for Bryce Young. You can't change the fact you didn't accept a multiple first round deal for Brian Burns and got a much subpar deal later on. You can't change the fact that you probably didn't get enough for Christian McCaffrey when you were selling him. All of that's in the past. You can only take from where you are right now and move on. So for the couple of moves they have made in this offseason, it feels like they're saying exactly what you're saying is, we need to know what we have in Bryce Young. We traded up, we spent all of this money, all this draft capital, traded away one of our best receivers, everything to get this guy in house. We have to find out if he's worth holding on to after the next couple of years. He is behind the eight ball. He's going to learn a whole new system this year. It's just, where do you go from here? And so, yeah, I think getting 33 and 39 in here, being able to actually morph this team a little bit, is going to be interesting. And they're going to be one of more interesting stories going into Bryce Young's second year. If he has a tough year this year, you could see the, abort button happening really, really fast. But hopefully getting him some pieces, like a guy like Deontay Johnson, is the kind of move to start progressing his career around. So Deontay Johnson is a Panther. One that happened a little before the clock struck tampering was Russell Wilson signing the league minimum deal to become the maybe starting quarterback. Is there a competition of the Pittsburgh Steelers? So Deontay Johnson leaves Pittsburgh, and Russell Wilson will not be throwing the ball to him, but guys like George Pickens. I mean, it's an interesting little deal. I think it's a, since it's a league minimum, there's not a lot of financial investment into it, but I don't know. Is this something inspiring for Pittsburgh? I guess everybody's to be the judge, but Mike Tomlin with a Super Bowl winning quarterback isn't the worst sounding thing in the world. He's done a lot more with a lot less. So, I mean, what do you think, Dan? Is Russell a guy that we should be looking at having a comeback year next year?
So the narrative around Russ right now is obviously terrible.
Yeah,
The
of course.
Broncos are eating the biggest dead cap hit in the history of the NFL just to get this guy off the roster. And they're doing that with no solution at the
Mhm,
position. Like,
mhm.
hey, if they drafted a kid late round and he looked great in a couple games and, like, you want to see what he's got, then yeah, I can understand that. No, they literally have nothing behind Russ. So it's very interesting. I feel like this has got, like, 30 for 30 written all over it, like Sean Payton coming back to the NFL, like, and him and Russ just like fighting. Because there's all the stories about, like, Russ had his own office, then Sean Payton came in and was like, nope, we're taking that away. So
Yep.
a lot of personalities, a lot of storylines in Denver. But as we could see, this is the final result. Sean Payton stays, Russell Wilson leaves, and Russell Wilson now is a Pittsburgh Steeler.
Yeah.
But let's not forget, earlier in 2023, Russ was actually looking a bit better.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if it was Sean Payton who saved him, or just,
Right.
Russ, I don't know, stretched a little better or something. But, Russ was looking decent again. Um, and it's kind of like the perfect solution for Pittsburgh, because Mike Tomlin doesn't lose. So they're never going to be in a
Right.
position to have a top 5 pick to get one of these quarterbacks.
Right.
Trading from, 18 or 20 up to 1, that's a steep asking price.
Right.
Trey Lance, when the 49ers went and got Trey Lance, they went from, what, 12 to 3, I think it was.
Yep.
And that cost them 3 first-round draft picks. So
Exactly.
I don't
Yep.
want to know the price of going from 20 to 1 is all 3 drafts that you have
Yeah,
available.
your next 3 drafts, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Pittsburgh had a Kenny Pickett problem.
Right.
Kenny was not performing, and he was bench for Mason Rudolph at one point. And
Right.
listen, Mason, he played well here or there, but he's also been in Pittsburgh for 4 years. Like, we know
Exactly.
what Mason Rudolph is. He's not a
Yep.
solution, and just kind of further reinforces how bad Kenny Pickett was playing. So now this solution falls into Mike Tomlin's lap. We're like, hey, I have an answer at the quarterback position that I wouldn't normally have access to because my team is never bad enough to pick that highly.
Right.
So
Right.
will this work out for Pittsburgh? I don't know. I mean, I'm not going to predict that they're going to be a losing team. Like, they're still going to finish, 10-7, and they're going to
Sure.
still make the playoffs because it's Mike Tomlin. That's what he does. But I don't have very high hopes for this offense with Russell Wilson there. I think he's a little bit on the decline. Let's not
Sure.
forget he's going to be 36 years old this year.
Exactly. Yep.
And Tom Brady has kind of ruined age for everyone. But
Sure.
in years past, 36-year-old quarterbacks are on their way to the league.
Right.
So
Well, and what made Russ so good early on was his mobility and the ability to escape and keep a play alive. And it's just something he's lost in recent years. I mean, he just isn't as mobile or as capable of keeping plays alive like that. And we've seen him, start to go downhill from that point. The last year in Seattle wasn't an unbelievable year for him. And then in Denver, he obviously didn't do enough. They're literally paying him to not be there. They signed him to a 4 or 5 year extension that he didn't get to. I mean, that's crazy. Um, but I mean, is Russ a better option than, I mean, just because he's still the talk of everything of then trading a pick for Justin Fields and going with a little younger guy? I mean, we're saying the Steelers never bad enough to get in that top, area, but Fields, for being a younger quarterback, has shown at least a little bit at, being able to make some plays and be a playmaker for your offense. And it's something that the Steelers have been missing big time from their quarterback. I just don't know if Russ is a better solution to that. He's a cheaper one, at least. So maybe that's the thought for right now. And they'll see how it goes. Maybe they can catch lightning in a bottle and get him to do something, but I don't know, man. Steelers country, let's steal.
Steelers Nation, let's weld.
Let's forge. I don't know. We'll see. It's how long it'll take until half these guys that kind of represent more of like a blue collar city like Pittsburgh are just like, yeah, I can't deal with this guy anymore. I don't want to hear Russell Wilson's voice in my locker room anymore, or doing stretches on the plane or whatever it is. But yeah. So but we're running out of time here. So before we get out of here, any big kind of overarching themes or anything that you've seen so far in the free agency period, or biggest surprises for you so far in what's going to be the new league year in the NFL?
So my one big takeaway is, we've talked about this in the past, how we thought the running back market would be suppressed. We thought the running backs would be signed
Mm-hmm.
maybe even after the NFL draft to not as much money. And we were kind of completely wrong on that because they were the first ones to sign and they're all signing for quite a bit of money. So
Yeah.
is our takeaway from the past 2 days that this running back class in 2024 is really not it? Did all these GMs and front office personnel go into Indianapolis last week to the combine, see these kids run, interview them, and then came back and were like, all right, Derrick Henry needs to make $12 million this year.
Yeah.
That was kind of my main takeaway from all this.
Well, and I think the other part that I was thinking about, because we had kind of chatted and talked about that a little bit. The other thing that I was thinking about was how, outside of like Bijan and Jameer Gibbs last year, that, like, I mean, Achan, looked pretty good. There's some all right looking backs, but like there hasn't been a ton of big name backs that have, one, stayed healthy, or two, produced where we thought they would, that have come into the league the last few years. So like for every Brees Hall, who did get injured, and Jameer Gibbs and Bijan Robinson, there's just tons of guys that have never really fully broken out and produced. So with the league kind of not getting that huge influx of top talent, I think some teams are holding on to that idea of the, workhorse kind of three down backs, being a huge advantage for their team. And guys like, I mean, obviously the top guys in Josh Jacobs and in Saquon Barkley getting deals, but we saw DeAndre Swift get a big deal. Tony Pollard get a big deal. Derrick Henry is a Raven now, which is like,
Scary.
Like the second you saw him in like the the Photoshop of Derrick Henry in a Raven uniform, it's like, why wasn't he that his whole career? Like that's Derrick Henry right there. Devin Singletary got a deal. Gus Edwards got a deal. Zach Moss is the Bengals' new running back. Antonio Gibson got a deal. It's just it is interesting to see how hard it seemed for backs to get money, and now they're maybe valued a little bit more if they're near that top talent. So I'm excited to kind of see what the running back position looks like, especially as a fantasy player going into next year. I'm just trying to keep my head on straight of where they're all playing now, because it's a lot of guys that played in one place for a long time that are all in a different place now.
Yeah. And then I do want to mention my other takeaway is kind of the interior defensive line market. I know I
Mhm.
mentioned it before, but um, just real quick, Bill Belichick, like I remember interview with him one time was I believe he was running a 4-3 defense, and then he switched to a 3-4. And a lot of people are saying like, "Hey, Bill, like why the change? Why the sudden shift in your scheme?" And he was like, "Because there's a market advantage." He's like, nobody's paying these linebackers, so they're cheap and they're athletic, and I can make it work. And
Right.
are we kind of seeing like a similar thing happen with the defensive tackle market right now? I'm just looking at the numbers right here, and we had 4 guys just this week sign contracts for over, $21 million a year, which is almost unheard of for that position. Up
Right.
until now, it's been edge defender this, edge defender that. Is that something that is going to matriculate into the draft? Are we going to see somebody like a
Right.
Johnny Newton go much earlier than we
Sure.
would have in past years because these top of the line guys are making 21, 22, $23 million a year?
No, it's a really, really good point. Something that we're going to see, in little over a month, for sure. The last thing I wanted to say was just looking at the wide receivers. We kind of knew it going into free agency, but with T. Higgins getting franchise tagged and Michael Pittman getting tagged and eventually getting a deal and Evans getting re-signed, you don't get a top wide receiver without drafting a wide receiver. That's that's how you get top wide receivers. When you see, we just talked about how running backs are getting paid. Good for running backs, right? Well, guess what? Darnell Mooney and Gabe Davis both signed deals that were bigger than any running back this entire offseason. So when you want a great wide receiver, they don't come and hit the market. They are not out there and available for you to just sign. You usually have to trade for one and give up a lot of assets, or you're getting second tier guys. I don't have any problems with Darnell Mooney or Gabe Davis, but what I'm saying is when you're going to be paying those guys $13 million a year, that's what shows you of how important the wide receiver position is, but how those guys that are going to be out there are not going to be the guys that are be true game changers for your team. We have a very, very good wide receiver class coming into this draft. So I'm really excited to see over the next month and a half how all of those wide receivers are going to become even more important and more relevant because the wide receiver market is so barren most years in free agency.
Yeah. All right. Well, this is a great discussion. We could have gone on for another couple hours, but
Absolutely.
we do have to get out of here tonight. So we are in, I guess, what I would call wave 2 of free agency now. The
Yep.
big names have come and gone, but there's still a handful of guys that are out there. You got some old names like your Odell Beckhams, your Michael Thomases, and then you got your retreads. Like a Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Where does he land? So
Yep.
stay tuned to the channel. We'll keep you updated with all the news as it happens. Be sure to hit that subscribe button. We're trying to grow our following here. Turn on notifications, and watch out because mock drafts are coming very, very shortly.
Yeah.
You guys all have a great night and enjoy the rest of free agency.
Have a
See
good
you
one,
later.
everybody.